Number 1. House on the Hill. There was this old house that was set on a hill outside of the town that I grew up in. As far as I'm aware, even now, there was no one who truly ever lived inside the house. By that I mean no one officially. There may have been vagrants or other homeless people that stayed there. There might have also been people who were dared to spend the night there. The reason for this was because it was well thought in the town that the house was haunted. So every now and then, someone would be dared to spend the night there. Of course the house wasn't really haunted, and nothing bad ever happened to any of the people who stayed there. At the most they came out of there with a new story to tell, which was probably not true to begin with. If you were driving into town, you would see the house sitting up on the hill, all alone. It was a pretty big place, and I still have no idea who ever lived there. It was nestled nicely into the trees, and in my own opinion, was even scarier than the house from the Psycho movies. When I was younger, we used to dare each other to go up to the house and knock on the door. None of my group of friends ever made it to the porch. We wouldn't even go as a group. That is how scared we were of that place. Lots of boys got mocked by the others when they eventually chickened out. The only way to get out of being made fun of was to find someone new to make fun of. Luckily, when I was younger, all of my friends were just as chicken as I was. None of them would dare each other to go up to the house because we were scared that we would be dared next, that our only option would be to chicken out. However, when I entered high school, I began hanging out with a few different friends than I had before. They were a bit more of a popular clique, so I felt I was moving up in the world. I never thought by hanging out with them, though, that I would have the scariest moment of my life. My new friends and I were walking along the rural road outside of town. We had been out there for the whole day, and the sun had been setting. It was still relatively early because it was mid-fall at the time. In fact, one of the reasons we had been out that day was because we enjoyed the falling leaves. When we got up to the fence that cut off the land the house was on from the road, my friends all began talking about the house. We were sharing all the old stories that we had heard about the place. I don't remember any of them really. However, I can still picture the house in my mind on the side of that hill. And on that day, most of the trees on that property were pretty bare, and that just made the house look even more frightening. They were definitely deader than the other trees on the hills, which were still shedding their leaves. I don't recall how exactly it got started, but my new friends dared me to break into the house, go up to the second floor window, and wave to them. They probably could tell that I was too scared to even consider doing such a thing. But the way they prodded me, it was almost like they were telling me that I had to, or they wouldn't be friends with me much longer. I was told that I should be able to get in through the back door, so I walked up to the house and got myself over into the side yard. Even walking around that house was scarier than I could have imagined. It was rotting and decaying, and every gust of wind sent a cold shiver down my spine. The back porch was in better condition than the front one. I noticed that the back door had a broken window in it. However, I couldn't see inside the house because there were also old curtains hanging on the inside of the window. Going up to the door, I tried the handle. It wouldn't turn. The door was locked. I almost considered giving up and telling my friends that I couldn't get in. However, I didn't want to face the ridicule that I would if I did that. The broken window was just one of 6 small pieces of glass in the door. The one that was broken out was really close to the doorknob. I figured that was how people got into the house. I had to reach in and unlock the door that way, so I slowly reached in and grabbed for the doorknob. I didn't think about moving the curtain and peering in first, but in retrospect, I really wish I had. Someone grabbed my wrist as I tried to unlock the door. I struggled, but at first, they were way too strong for me to pull away from. I cried out, hoping my friends would come and help me, but there was really no hope of that happening. While I kept trying to pull my arm away, I looked up at the door. I wasn't able to see much, but whoever had my hand was looking from behind the curtain. It was a scary, partial face. Just maybe a fourth of the right side of their face, but what I could see was pale, wrinkled, and was looking down on me. I assumed whoever it was had to be pretty big and strong. I began panicking even harder and trying like crazy to pull my arm loose and get free. After some panicking and screaming, the figure let go of my arm. I fell down hard on the floor of the porch, but I didn't stay there for long. I got up, ran down the steps and through the side yard. I slid and fell on the leaves, and almost a second time when my friends were laughing at me. But they seemed surprised when I ran right past them without looking back. In fact, I was the first of us to make it over the fence and took off down the road. My friends didn't see anything, but they could tell how scared I was. They came after me, but I didn't stop running until I physically couldn't anymore. We didn't tell anyone what happened, though. I mean, we were trespassing after all. My friends did not hold it against me for running either. I think they all knew they would have too in my place. Number 2. Country House. I grew up in a very beautiful country home. I lived my entire life there until I moved out for college. My father had built it himself before I was born. He was a carpenter. I liked being there during all the seasons of the year, but I have to admit that autumn was always my favorite time of year. Things were just so beautiful there, with the leaves turning colors and falling all over the place. There was a fall day, however, where it wasn't exactly what I would call beautiful in any way. It was a wet and blustery day. I didn't know what was falling harder, the leaves or the rain. But it didn't matter, because it was a weekend day, so I didn't have to go out in it to get to school. I had schoolwork to do, so I just stayed in my bedroom, which was on the second story of the house, and did my homework at my desk. My parents were not at home. They both worked long hours on the weekend, so I was in the house all by myself. This was a very usual thing, and it didn't bother me at all, even when the weather outside was as dark and creepy as it was on this day. My room faced the front of the house. My desk was right under the front window in my room, so it looked out over the front lawn and the driveway of our home. So while I was studying, I would occasionally look up and out the window at the mix of weather that was going on outside. I actually found it calming and an aid to my studying. I could see all the way down our driveway and out to the road that went past our house. When I looked out at one point, I noticed someone walking along the road. It didn't mean that much to me at the time, so I didn't pay it much mind. People in the area were always taking walks down that road. It did seem a bit weird that they were doing it while the weather was so bad, but some people like to take walks in the bad weather too. I went back to studying, and to a few moments later, when I was trying to answer a focus question at the end of the chapter I was reading. When I did, I looked up again, and I saw the person who was walking standing at the entrance to our driveway. They weren't walking at that point, simply standing there and looking at the house. This made me curious, but we did live in a beautiful house, so they might have just been admiring it. But as I began to look back at my work, I noticed they began slowly walking up our driveway. I started wondering who it could be. I wasn't anxious or anything. I assumed it was someone that we knew, who had a legitimate reason for being in our yard. But I couldn't reconcile the body dimensions of the person with anyone that I could think of. Also, for some reason, I couldn't make out their features very well either. As the person kept getting closer and closer to the house, I tried my best to discern who it was, but that wasn't working. I began wondering if it was a salesman or someone like that, but wondered why they would be walking on foot, especially on a day like today. When they got up close to the house, I expected them to go onto my porch and knock on the front door. However, this person went to the side of the house instead. This was the first moment that I got a little scared, not being able to think of any valid reason that anyone should be there. Suddenly, the power cut off in the house. I immediately knew it was because of that person. There was a box and a switch on the side of the house that would cut the power in the entire house. Not knowing what exactly to do, but now being really scared, I went and grabbed my rifle out of the closet. I had had the rifle for several years, as I enjoyed going hunting with my dad. I loaded it pretty quickly, hoping that I was overreacting. I crept down the stairs to the first floor, nervous, but not feeling like I was in any danger yet. I hadn't heard any noises that indicated anyone had broken into the house. On the first floor, I didn't see anything out the front door or the front window, so I decided to check in the kitchen, which was at the back of the house. Going back there, I was stunned when I looked out the window of the back door. There was someone there wearing a rubber clown mask and just staring in the back door window. And this wasn't like a normal run-of-the-mill clown mask. It was definitely a horror clown mask, deliberately made to be scary. He was also covered in wet leaves, which just made him look even scarier. The person lifted his hand up and waved at me as I stood there, stunned. I am not afraid of clowns, mind you, but I am afraid of people wearing masks who shut my electricity off when my parents aren't home. But also, he may have chosen to wear that mask because a lot of people are afraid of clowns, and he was trying to scare me. I quickly pulled the rifle up and pointed it at him. He changed his wave from a hello wave to a goodbye wave, and quickly disappeared. I grabbed the kitchen phone and quickly called my dad at work. He was a mechanic and owned his own shop, so he told me he would come home right away, but he insisted that I stay in the house. I listened to him, but it was difficult too. I mean, I had my rifle, so I wasn't too terrified of going outside. But I waited until we got home. He searched around the area and wasn't able to find anyone, but that was no surprise. He worked in town, and it was a bit of a long drive to get to our house from there. He didn't find anyone, and whoever that person was, he was lucky. My dad could be a bit of a violent guy when he wanted to be, and there was no telling what he would have done if he'd gotten his hands on that guy. That guy never came back, so we never found out who it was. We eventually chalked it up to a random event with a random asshole just trying to scare someone, but we never knew for sure. Number 3. Wicked Stepmother. My stepmother was a real bitch. I mean, she was such a bitch that I can't even to this day mention her name without getting extremely pissed off. So I won't be identifying her in this story, and I will simply refer to her as my stepmother. She and my dad got married shortly after my parents got divorced. She was a lot younger than my dad, and I often wondered what she saw in him. However, when my dad left the military service and became a truck driver, it became all too apparent. We moved from the military base to a house in rural Ohio. It was a huge house, but also pretty run down. But my dad had this thing about wanting to live out in the country and having us kids live there too, so we took us there. The house itself was a good 45-minute drive out of town. Our house was on the top of a small hill, and there was a trailer at the bottom of the hill. Other than that, the only thing around us were tons of trees and hills. She didn't have to get a job at any point during the years that I knew her, even though my dad didn't make enough money to keep us above the poverty line. She just sat on her fat ass all day, while making us stepkids do all the house cleaning. More than that, she was also cheating on my dad, nearly every time that he was out of town. The only smart thing she ever seemed to do, though, was that she always had the affairs outside of the house. We knew they happened because not only did she brag about them to us, she also violently threatened us in case we ever told our dad what was happening. He was also drunk so often himself that it likely wouldn't have made any difference anyway. He would probably forget about it the next morning. Well, that all changed one night when my dad was away on a job. I was usually happy when she went off on one of her cheating dates because she would be gone the whole night. This time, however, I noticed something weird. I was up in my second-floor bedroom reading a book by lamplight. I noticed a car pulling up in our driveway. The day had been the first really severe fall day. You know what I mean, where the trees really start losing their leaves and they are falling like rain. This continued into the night, of course, and it made it hard to make out the vehicle coming up the driveway. I at first thought it might be my dad, but he would have been driving his rig, and this was obviously something else. It wasn't until the people got out of the car and were talking awfully loud that I figured out it had to be my stepmother and whatever guy she was with. I was surprised that she would have brought them home to our house, but figured she must have thought she was safe since my dad would be gone for a whole week. It was very uncomfortable hearing her come into the house, flirting loudly with the guy. I tried to do my best to just ignore it and read my book, but it wasn't going very good. I definitely never thought about turning my light off and then trying to go to sleep because I never would have gone to sleep with all that noise occurring right in the house with me. I just kept lying in bed reading. Suddenly, I heard someone walking around. Then, almost faster than I could have imagined, my bedroom door was thrust open. There was a light on in the hallway, so I saw the shadow of my stepmother come into the room. She was yelling and screaming at me, threatening me in her drunken haze that if I mentioned anything about this to my dad, she would kill me. Coming right up to my bed, the woman literally grabbed me by the shoulders and started shaking me while she was screaming her threats at me. I was in shock, wondering where all this was coming from. I had, of course, never been drunk in my life at that point, so I didn't know how it could screw with one's head. Tired of her crap, I pried her hands off me and shoved her back away from me. She stumbled and fell up against the wall, hitting her head. She stumbled, got up, and ran out of the room. But she wasn't gone very long. Only moments later, she was back at the door, and she had my dad's gun with her, and she had it pointed directly at me. She was screaming at me about how dare I put my hands on her, while totally forgetting that she was assaulting me at the time. She was threatening to shoot me, calling me all sorts of names. When she pulled back the hammer on the gun, I became indescribably terrified. I did know that being drunk could make someone sloppy and unbalanced, and she could have accidentally shot and killed me with no problem. It was a tense few moments, and I didn't really know how long it lasted. Fortunately, though, the guy she was cheating with obviously wasn't as drunk as she was. He found out what was happening, and he carefully took the gun away from her. While he was doing it, though, I kept expecting her to shoot me. He apologized to me, as if it really meant anything at the time. I got up, went downstairs, and they went back to my dad's room. I made a phone call, and let's just say that for some reason, both of them were pretty shocked when the police showed up very shortly after. I explained what happened, and nothing was done to the guy. But my stepmother was arrested, and shortly afterwards my dad kicked her out. That was in the late 80s, and thankfully, I've never seen that bitch since. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. First, as always, I want to thank all my paid Patreon members, starting with my two VIPs, Chiamerah Cat and Pixie Hopper 8. I also want to thank Stinky News, EricaOdd, Tracy Sellars, Chronic J, and Heidi H. I hope everyone is doing good. Everything is going pretty well here. We're still in the process of trying to buy this house, and the whole thing going on with the possum who keeps showing up, and has brought a lot of joy in my life, so... And as always, I want to remind you that if you can't pay to be a Patreon member, you can become a free member. The link is in my description. and you'd be able to have your name read at the end of the videos. If you like the video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified of new videos. Leave me a comment that I'll try to get back to, and share the video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address in the description. And now I'd like to mention all my free Patreon members: Anthony Bowers, Remi, Venikins, Rose Metro, Woofer McWooferson, Cindy Cleveland, Vanapira Rayne, William H., Alien Unicorn 13, Kathryn Lynch, The Bama Guy 334, Michael Vasquez, Bonnie Lynn, Collet Bond, Krista Pike, Prince UVA, HF Creations, Bonnie Gibbs, Linda Moore, DJ Lira, and Evil Black Cat. But most importantly, don't forget to check in your closet and under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.